Russian President Dmitri Medvedev is going to United States, starting off his visit in the Silicon Valley, which is of course where he's hoping that he can draw some of United States IT expertise into the Russian sphere. Modernization is part of a cycle of Russian history. Russia is a traditionally capital-poor economy, and this really comes down to its geography and climate. Russia expands over a really enormous portion of the territory of Eurasia, and it doesn't really have any natural defenses. As such, its defense outlays are enormous, and transportation costs are even greater. Russia has had to import modernization efforts from the top, because it needs to consolidate what little capital it has and really put it to work. You had Alexander III trying to build the Trans-Siberian Railroad, you had Stalin with enormous industrialization efforts in between the wars, and you said Gorbachev also in the 80s. What is interesting about today's modernization effort is that it comes after Russia has consolidated itself in its former Soviet Union sphere of influence. This is really important for Russia because defense of the Russian core is most important geopolitical imperative for Moscow. As such, it needs to have a ring of buffer states that extend Russia to natural barriers, such as the Tian Shan Mountains in Central Asia, such as the Caucasus, the Carpathians, and the North European Plain. What is interesting about Russian modernization efforts is that they have always relied on Western Europe, or in this case, in the modern context, the United States. And what has always followed these modernization efforts is a moment of temporary restraint, if you will, in Russian aggressive foreign policy. And it will have a compliant foreign policy in order to get what it needs in terms of technology and capital. But the key to any successful Russian modernization effort is that it comes from the top and that it has essentially the approval of the elites. Prime Minister Vladimir Putin feels comfortable enough at this moment, especially with Russia again exerting its influence in the former Soviet Union, to attempt to do this. But Russia can no longer rely on the one capital resource, if you will, that it has relied on in the past to get modernization moving, and that's human capital. The kind of modernization that Russia really wants to proceed on right now is really about technical know-how, and simply throwing a massive amount of people at this problem is not going to resolve it, which is why it's going to be a lot more difficult for Russia, and which is why it's concentrating on that relationship with the West.